Hello everyone, Spiceman here, and welcome to the virtual Airwing 11 training presentation on intercept geometry. Today we'll be talking about the fundamentals of air-to-air intercept geometry, along with a discussion of the timeline of a properly executed air-to-air intercept. Air-to-air intercepts, along with aviation in general, are more art than science, but a good understanding of the fundamentals will improve your chances of a successful intercept, even in a complex and highly dynamic environment. So with that, let's get started. So at its most basic, the purpose of an air-to-air intercept is to obtain and sustain air superiority over contested airspace. So what we're trying to do essentially is to place our aircraft in a position in space that achieves a positional advantage over an enemy aircraft. Positional advantage can mean placing ourselves in between the enemy and a defended point or a defended piece of airspace or a defended target, the fleet. The other goal of the intercept is to control the geometry of the intercept in such a way that it aids us in achieving an acceptable launch parameter, um, and while at the same time denying the enemy from achieving a successful launch parameter. And we want to arrive at the merge with an advantage either in position and or energy. And from that point on, it's basic fighter maneuvers to destroy or deter the enemy. So that's the overall purpose of an air-to-air intercept. So there are two primary methods that we'll use to obtain that positional advantage. We will use one or both. The one of them is a cutoff vector. So a cutoff vector is very quickly getting yourself in a position that allows you to place yourself between the enemy and the defended point or the defended airspace. The other method is the collision course. So a collision course is the fastest way for you to arrive in the same point in space as your enemy. Think of a cornerback in football chasing down a wide receiver. They don't run straight at them. What they do is they take an angle, and the goal is to arrive at the same point in space at the same time, which is not simply following the receiver. We're not simply going to point our nose and charge at the enemy. The goal is to get ourselves on a course that will allow us to arrive at the same point in space at the same time. That is the fastest way to intercept the bogey. So there are two angles that we're talking about when we talk about a successful or proper collision course. The one angle is the angle at which we, the fighter, see the bogey. And we call that the antenna training angle or angle off. The other angle that we're talking about is the angle at which the bogey sees us. And that is what we call a target aspect. Now, when we have a successful collision course, those two angles will remain constant throughout. We'll see a decreasing range, but we'll have a constant bearing. And these two angles, the antenna training angle and the target aspect, will remain constant. So that's what we call constant bearing, decreasing range. And when you've achieved that, you've achieved a successful collision course. If the two aircraft are not at equal speeds, you won't have a perfect isosceles triangle. If the two aircraft are at the same speed, these two angles give you an isosceles triangle. So in the illustration that we see here, the target aspect, the angle at which the bogey sees the fighter, is 30 degrees. And the antenna training angle, the angle at which the fighter sees the bogey, is 30 degrees. So we have two angles of our triangle here that are equal. We have an isosceles triangle. And that's what they call the intercept triangle, right? So in a successful intercept, those two angles are equal. And now if they're at different speeds, these two angles may not be equal. But in any case, there is only one collision course for any given speed ratio. And if you attain that collision course, the angles will remain constant as the range decreases. So the ultimate goal, if we fly a collision course correctly and successfully, and with two aircraft at the same altitude, if we do nothing, we'll have a mid-air collision. And that would be a successful intercept flown on a collision course. So now let's take a look at a video that demonstrates flying a successful collision course and showing the angles and the geometry we just discussed. So in this video, the aircraft is locked up at target. Let's take a look at the target display and what it's showing us. So we can see to the right of the target display, we have the target's altitude, in this case 10.8, 10,800. To the left of the target, we have its airspeed and indicated Mach number, in this case 0.7. Got the range caret on the right, and next to it we have the closure, in this case 760 knots. The vertical line running through the radar display is our antenna training angle, or angle off in this case. We have 10 degrees or so left angle off. So we have, and the other key part of the display is the target aspect angle, right? So the line emanating from our radar contact is the target aspect. Looking at it here, we have about a 40-degree left target aspect. In other words, the pilot in this radar contact here would turn his head 40 degrees to the left if he wanted to look at us. So let's continue on. So knowing that we have a 40-degree left target aspect, if we want to place this bandit on a collision course, we're going to turn and place him 40 degrees right angle off. So those are the two angles of our isosceles triangle there. 40 degrees left target aspect, 40 degrees right angle off. So let's fast forward a little bit. We could see we've turned now and placing the target 40 degrees angle off. Winds up in a heading of about 343 with 40 degrees angle off. And if this is a successful collision course, we should be able to ride this all the way to a mid-air collision, right? So we see we've jumped to 33 nautical miles now, still on a heading of 343 with 40 degrees right angle off. That's pretty good. It hasn't really changed at all. Fast forwarding to 16 nautical miles, still 343, 40 degrees. Again, that's pretty good. One thing to mention here is the airspeeds, right? So we know the Bandit is at Mach 0.7, so we are maintaining our own indicated Mach number of 0.7. We progressed here now, 13 nautical miles, still 343, 40 degrees angle off. It'll start to drift here a little bit, but we're at almost 10 nautical miles now. No, it isn't necessary to compensate much at this point. Still progressing, still holding pretty steady. Very little relative motion from a radar perspective. If we look outside the cockpit here, which I think we'll do fairly soon in this video, there we go. There's our contact right there, and you'll notice very little relative motion. Is pretty much nailed to a single spot on our canopy there. So pretty good intercept. So now just ride that on in. Let's see how we did. Pretty good. So from 50 nautical miles out, we turned, we set our angles, and with hardly a single change over those 50 miles, we wound up on almost a perfect collision course. So in the previous video, we showed an example of a intercept flown to a near mid-air collision. Obviously, in the real world, that's not what we're going to wind up doing. So what we would do normally at the end of an air-to-air intercept is a conversion turn, or a stern conversion turn. What the stern conversion turn does is put you in the rear quarter of the Bandit. It begins at 10 nautical miles. You turn head on to the Bandit, and then you follow the Bandit using pure pursuit. And if you've done the intercept correctly, at the end, as you roll out of the end of that turn in pure pursuit, you'll find yourself right around a mile, mile and a half or so behind the bandit in a perfect setup for a aim 9 sidewinder shot. Now, you're probably saying that, still, this is an awful cooperative bandit. Bandits in the real world aren't going to be all those cooperative, and it's absolutely true. And we'll talk about ways to deal with that a little bit later on. But another way where this is really useful is joining up with tankers or friendly formations. How many times have you found yourself doing a head-to-head pass with a tanker only to have to do a 180 and chase it down? Well, knowing proper intercept geometry, there's really not going to be any excuse for that anymore. This is a great way to roll out behind a tanker as well. So back to our presentation now, let's talk about some of the other terms that we'll be using. We talked about target aspect. We talked about antenna training angle or angle off. Slant range is the straight line distance between you and the bandit. Bandit heading is the heading of the intercepted aircraft, and the bandit flight path is the extension of the bandit's travel through space on its current heading. And likewise, terms apply to the fighter heading and the fighter flight path. The bandit reciprocal is the bandit's reciprocal heading, and the bandit bearing is the bearing between the fighter's position and the bandit's position. So those are some of the common terms we'll be using throughout the training lesson here. An important part of the intercept is recognizing the target aspect. It's important that we want to be able to interpret target aspect to within 10 degrees from the radar attack display. It's that target aspect that really establishes the initial conditions of your intercept. Another important term in the intercept is lateral separation. So lateral separation is the horizontal distance from the fighter to the bandit's flight path. Lateral separation is turning room. The formula for lateral separation is target aspect multiplied by slant range multiplied by 100. So if we're looking at the diagram there on the left, you can see that our target aspect is 30 degrees. Our slant range is 20 nautical miles. And that gives us a lateral separation of 60,000 feet, or 10 miles. And we can also see from the illustration that since slant range only changes over time, but target aspect can change almost instantaneously. Lateral separation will change instantaneously with changes in target aspect, but only very slowly with changes in slant range over time. So in effect, as you can see, the bandit has great control over lateral separation. If he wants to deny us lateral separation, he can do that by simply turning into us. But there are ways that you have of dealing with that, which we'll see later on. So let's talk about our lateral separation goal. It really boils down to this. The goal of an intercept is to arrive 10 nautical miles from the bandit with 40,000 feet of lateral separation. That is our ultimate goal in our airborne intercept. With 40,000 feet of lateral separation, we have room to turn nose on at that 10 nautical miles, maintain a pure pursuit, and roll out at the rear quarter of the bandit at about a mile, mile and a half, launch acceptability region for a short-range missile shot. So that's really the end goal of an intercept, is to arrive at 10 nautical miles with 40,000 feet of lateral separation. Now, to achieve that goal, we'll have to do one of three things. We'll either have to turn to create lateral separation, we'll turn to preserve lateral separation, or we'll turn to remove lateral separation. Now, which type of turn will be required, we'll determine at various points in the intercept, and we'll do that by memorizing these lateral separation gates. Now, these are pretty easy to memorize, and they're key. And as you can see from the chart here, every 5 nautical miles or 10 nautical miles, we have a gate that we want to hit on the way to achieving that lateral separation goal. 40-10, 30-15, 15-30, 20-20, 40-10, Once you've run a few intercepts, it's very easy to memorize these gates, and we want to do that because hitting these gates is really important to prosecuting a proper intercept. So now let's talk about two other terms used in intercept geometry, which is heading, crossing angle, and cut. So heading crossing angle is the number of degrees between the fighter heading and the bandit heading, right? So it's essentially the angle that the bandit is coming across your point of view. Cut is the angle from the fighter heading to the bandit reciprocal, which is your 180 degrees minus your heading crossing angle. So as we can see from this diagram, cut and heading crossing angle really determine what lateral separation and target aspect is going to be doing. So if your cut angle is greater than your collision bearing, imagine the blue fighter here turned to the right. So the blue line is farther down here. That is your cut angle is too high, right? And if your cut angle is too high, you're essentially passing in front of the bandit. Not a good thing, right? So you'll see lateral separation will decrease, and target aspect will decrease as well. Imagine the pilot in our enemy fighter there be turning his head from right to left, watching us cross in front of him, right? That target aspect will be decreasing. If your cut angle is on collision, which is kind of what you're looking for, you'll be decreasing lateral separation and your target aspect will remain constant. If your cut angle is less than your collision course, which kind of looks like is the case in this drawing here, you can see the red fighter has less of a distance to travel than the blue fighter on that collision bearing there. Lateral separation will be decreasing. We're still traveling towards the bandit, but target aspect will be increasing in this case. We will pass behind the bandit. The bandit will be turning his head increasingly to the right here, watching us pass behind him in that case. If cut equals 0, essentially, we're parallel to the bandit. Lateral separation will be constant. Target aspect will be increasing. The enemy bandit will be watching us pass in parallel off to his right, turning his head to the right. And if we cut away, which is, imagine that blue fighter turning to the left, past parallel and divergent from the enemy's path, lateral separation in that case will be increasing, and our target aspect will also be increasing as well. So those are two other intercept terms to know. So now let's talk about drift. So if we don't properly establish our collision course, our collision bearing, then one of two things will happen. The bandit may pass in front of us, which may not be a bad thing at close range, or we will pass in front of the bandit, which of course would not be a good thing. A contact that is not on a proper collision course will drift. And the thing to remember here is that the drift will always be away from the proper collision bearing. So if you look at this radar attack display here, this pilot assessed collision bearing to be that red line there, put the bandit on it. He judged it incorrectly. The actual collision bearing should have been off to the left. So the bandit on this radar display is going to drift to the right or drift away from the proper collision bearing. So that's something we should remember if we do see that angle off, that antenna training angle drifting on our HUD display. We know that it's drifting away from what the proper collision bearing should have been. If we see it drifting to the right, we know that our collision bearing should have been more to the left. And so what we'll do is we will turn to the right to adjust that radar contact to the left where the proper collision bearing should have been. So now let's talk about how we go about maneuvering ourselves to arrive at that goal of 40,000 feet of lateral separation at 10 nautical miles. And how we go about that depends on the initial conditions of our intercept. It's called a game plan. And so depending on your initial conditions will determine which game plan you want to execute to arrive at the point we want to arrive at. If you're beginning from a low target aspect setup, we call it low if it's between 0 and 15 degrees of target aspect. Our closure rate will be the sum of our airspeed and the bandit's airspeed. There's a game plan for that. There's a game plan for a medium target aspect. A medium target aspect is one where we're beginning at between 15 and 35 degrees of target aspect. A high target aspect game plan will be used when we have a target aspect between 35 and 45 degrees upon the beginning of our intercept. A very high target aspect game plan we use if the target aspect is greater than 45 degrees. So depending on the initial target aspect when you first begin the intercept, you'll have a game plan to execute. That game plan will involve one or more turns to manage the intercept geometry. But the end goal, remember, is always the same. The end goal is always to arrive at 10 nautical miles with 40,000 feet of lateral separation. For an intercept that begins initially with a low target aspect between 0 and 10 degrees of target aspect, the game plan there is called a kick and build. So we need to increase our lateral separation to get to that 40,000 feet. And we could do that pretty quickly. The farther away we are, the quicker it will be. But you simply begin that with a turn away from the bandit, cold, a turn to the cold. You can really turn in the other direction, but a turn away from the bandit to put the bandit at 50 degrees angle off, right? And that's called the kick and build. Now, what you want to be careful to avoid here is gimbaling your radar antenna and losing lock. So you turn initially to put the bandit at 50 degrees angle off. You'll have to correct into the bandit to keep it at 50 degrees angle off, keep the radar from gimbaling and losing lock. But once you kick and build and you turn parallel to the bandit's flight path, and you just watch your gates. Remember your gates: 40, 10, 15, 30, 30, 30, 15, 20, 20, 40, 10. You're going to watch those gates, and you're going to, when you reach a proper gate where you can turn into the bandit at that 40 degrees of angle off, and then ride that 40 degrees of angle off, 40 degrees of target aspect into that 10 nautical miles and 40,000 feet of lateral separation. So let's look at a video example now of a low target aspect game plan. Here we are in the video. We've locked a target looking at the radar attack display. There's really no target aspect to speak of and a very high closure rate. So we'll begin the kick and build game plan. First part is the kick. Turn right, put them on a 50 degrees left angle off, and then what we do here is we watch and see how we achieve how we gain that lateral separation, and we use our gates that we've memorized to do that. So it looks like the first gate we're going to come on is our 20 nautical mile gate. So 40,000 feet of lateral separation at 20 nautical miles would be 20 degrees of target aspect. So let's see how we are in relation to that. So we'll pause it here at 20 nautical miles. Have we achieved 20 degrees of target aspect? No, not even close. It looks more like maybe 10. So right now we've got 20,000 feet of lateral separation. So we simply keep going. And we'll get to our next gate, which will be 15 nautical miles. At 15 nautical miles, we would want 30 degrees of target aspect. Pause it at 15 nautical miles. If we got 30 degrees of target aspect, pretty close. If that's not 30, it's 25. So we're pretty close to that 40,000 feet of lateral separation goal. So at this point, what we're going to want to do is turn to the bandit's reciprocal and parallel the bandit and sort of seal in that 40,000 feet of lateral separation.
So left-hand turn to the bandage reciprocal, which in this case is 080. And now we just sort of ride in that on that parallel heading. When we get to 10 nautical miles, if we're at 40,000 feet lateral separation, which we should be, we'll see 40 degrees of target aspect. So there we are at 10 nautical miles. We've got 40 degrees of target aspect. So now we perform our conversion turn into the bandit, pure pursuit, and we should roll out mile and a half behind. So that's looking pretty good. So there's your low target aspect game plan. It involves 3 turns. First turn, 50 degrees, angle off. Watch your target aspect progress as you go through your gates. Second turn is the bandit's reciprocal once you've achieved 40,000 feet of lateral separation. And then the third turn is your conversion turn.
Now let's look at an intercept that begins with a medium target aspect, medium being defined between 15 and 35 degrees of target aspect. With an intercept beginning in that range between 15 and 35 at 30 nautical miles, we've already got enough lateral separation. If we're at 15 degrees target aspect at 30 nautical miles, we've got 45,000 feet of lateral separation. If we're at 35 degrees target aspect at 30 nautical miles, we have over 90,000 feet of lateral separation. So we've already sort of achieved the goal of 40,000 feet lateral separation. So all we're going to do at this point is turn to the bandit's reciprocal. And we're going to watch that target aspect build. It's going to build to 40 degrees of target aspect, and then we're going to turn in at 40 degrees angle off and just ride that on into 10 nautical miles. If we started at 35 degrees of target aspect, that'll be a pretty short period of time. If we started with 15 degrees of target aspect, it'll take a little bit for it to build at 40. But regardless, once we hit that 40 degrees of target aspect, we'll turn in, we'll ride that 40 degrees of angle off into 10 nautical miles and then execute our conversion turn.
So now let's watch a video example of a medium target aspect game plan. So we've locked a target. Our initial target aspect looks about 25, 30 degrees or so. So medium target aspect, first turn is to parallel the bandit and turn to the bandit's reciprocal. In this case, 080. So now once we're on the bandit's reciprocal, we simply watch our target aspect increase. And once it gets to 40 degrees, which shouldn't take very long here, we simply execute a turn to 40 degrees angle off and just ride that on into 10 nautical miles. Getting pretty close, 40 degrees. There we go. Left turn, put them 40 degrees right, angle off, ride it into 10 nautical miles. Fast forward a little bit. There's 17. Still looking pretty solid. Here we are approaching 10. Visual on the bandit. Execute the conversion turn. So there you go. There's your medium target aspect game plan between 15 and 35 degrees of target aspect. First turn is to the bandit's reciprocal. Watch your target aspect build. Second turn is into your collision bearing, 40 degrees, angle off to 10 nautical miles. Third turn is your conversion turn.
Now let's talk about a high target aspect game plan. The high target aspect game plan begins with an initial target aspect between 35 and 45. You're already in the sweet spot with that sort of target aspect. So with that one's very simple. All you do is immediately turn to your collision bearing. Put the band at 40 degrees left or right angle off and just ride it there into 10 nautical miles. That's the essentially the video, my opening video, where we pretty much began with 40 degrees of target aspect. So let's look now at the very high target aspect game plan. So in this case, we begin initially with the target aspect of greater than 45 degrees. So what we've got to do here is basically chase down the proper collision bearing. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn hot 50 to 60 degrees angle off in the hot direction, turning into the bandit, putting him to our right 50 or 60 degrees. And then we're going to increase our airspeed 0.1 Mach number higher than the bandit, get a speed advantage, basically chase down our proper collision bearing. So we'll see a decreasing lateral separation as well as a decreasing target aspect as we're sort of running that down. And then once we've got that 40-degree target aspect, then we'll turn immediately into that 40 degrees of angle off and reduce our speed to match the bandit.
So now let's look at a video of a very high target aspect game plan. So I've got a target locked, looking at the target aspect, and that's a good 60 degrees target aspect or so. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to turn hot into the bandit through the bandit's flight path, and we're going to turn 50 degrees right angle off. And we're also going to increase our speed. The bandit is at Mach 0.7, so we're going to increase our speed to Mach 0.8. And then we're just going to watch that target aspect decrease as we effectively chase it down. 33 nautical miles now. Let's jump ahead a little bit. Here we are, 28 nautical miles, still chasing it down. Looks, it's not 45 yet, maybe 50 degrees target aspect or so. Continue to chase it down. Here it's fast forwarded to 18 nautical miles, getting pretty close. Probably begin the turn here pretty soon. Still decreasing. It's about 45. Turn right now to that 40 degrees right angle off and ride that to our 10 nautical mile, 40,000 foot goal. Decrease our speed now to match the bandit, 0.7, coming up on our 10 miles. Execute the conversion turn. So there you have it, very high target aspect, beginning greater than 45 degrees, initial turn hot, 50 degrees, angle off, increase airspeed 0.1 Mach number above the bandit. Second turn is once you've achieved your 40 degree target aspect into the 40 degrees angle off, collision bearing, decrease your speed then to match the bandit. Third turn is your conversion turn. So now let's summarize what we've learned about the target aspect game plans. There's 4 of them. The low aspect game plan, between 0 and 15 target aspect. That's the kick and build game plan. You're within the 40,000 foot of lateral separation goal. So we kick out 50 degrees antenna track training angle until we've achieved 40,000 feet of lateral separation. Then we assume the bandit's reciprocal until we reach our collision bearing of 40 degrees target aspect, assume our 40 degrees right, angle off, and drive to the 10 nautical mile point. The medium target aspect game plan, we've already got 40,000 feet of lateral separation, so we simply assume the bandit's reciprocal heading, drive forward until we reach our 40 degrees of target aspect, and then ride down that 40 degrees of angle off to the 10 nautical mile point. Our high target aspect game plan, we're already in that sweet spot there. We simply turn to 40 degrees angle off and ride down to that 10 nautical mile point. Our very high target aspect game plan area, greater than 45 degrees target aspect. We turn hot 50 degrees, 50 degrees angle off, one Mach number higher than our bandit. We drive uh, this way, as I'm showing here, till we get to that 40 degrees of target aspect, and then turn and ride down that 40 degrees angle off to the 10 nautical mile, 40,000 foot lateral separation point. So that summarizes our 4 target aspect game plans.
So let's talk about what you can do if you find yourself at that 10 nautical mile point and you haven't successfully achieved that 40,000 feet of lateral separation. So you're going to have to do what we call a displacement turn. So a displacement turn is an initial turn that's meant to rapidly give you some turning room without losing that radar contact with the bandit. That's a displacement turn. And the rule for that displacement turn is called the rule of 40. We know at that 10 nautical mile point, we should have had 40 degrees of target aspect. So what we'll do is we'll execute a displacement turn correcting for that. So we're going to do a 40 degree angle off displacement turn minus the target aspect that we do have at that point. If we've arrived at that 10 nautical miles and we have a target aspect of 20 degrees target aspect, we'll execute a 20 degree displacement turn. We'll turn cold 20 degrees, and then we'll execute our conversion turn. That's a displacement turn, and you execute what's called the rule of 40. So now let's talk about the progression of the intercept. An intercept follows a logical timeline, beginning at the commitment stage through to the merge, and we'll talk about that now. The first part of the intercept timeline is the commit, right? So an intercept really begins with a decision to commit. The commit criteria is derived from your mission objectives. If you're defending a high value asset, target cap, the barrier cap, fleet defense, you're going to have a more restrictive commit criteria because you don't want to be dragged away from your station to protecting that asset. Offensive counter air is completely different. Offensive counter air, basically you're out there looking for trouble, right? So you're just going to have a much looser commit criteria for offensive counter air as opposed to a defensive counter air mission where you're really trying to protect an asset or an area of airspace. And in your briefing, you should brief what your commit criteria are. A typical example would be a range of less than 50 nautical miles and a target aspect of less than 60 degrees, what AWACS would report as flanking or less. So looking at these two examples here in this diagram, the target in green, he's within 50 nautical miles, but he's got a target aspect of 70 degrees, right? So we would skip that intercept, right? Let him be on his way. He's not met our criteria, the asset that we're trying to defend. But the target in red there is at 50 nautical miles with a 40 degree target aspect. So he would meet that criteria for committing to an intercept. Once you've decided to commit to an intercept, you want to accelerate to tactical airspeed as 400 knots, Mach point 0.8, typically, as opposed to your sort of max conserve airspeed that you were on station at cap with, typically 4.5 units of AOA, which would give you about 280 knots or so at 25,000 feet. You would want to accelerate from that to a more tactical airspeed for the intercept. So now let's talk about the timeline of the intercept. Um, it begins within the range that you've briefed to commit, and in our case here, 50 nautical miles. So the target enters our zone there, 50 nautical miles. The first thing we want to do is point and assess. Get the target on our radar. You don't need to point right at them. 20 degrees angle off or so would be just fine, but get them on your radar and point and assess the geometry of the radar contact and make those decisions around what sort of intercept you're going to prosecute, your game plan, etc. And then no later than 35 nautical miles, you want to make that choice that you're going to commit or skip it. If you choose to commit, a radio call signaling your intentions to commit something along the lines of lion targeting single group bullseye 270 for 100, right? You're prosecuting this intercept. At 30 nautical miles, you've really entered your intercept timeline. You make a tactical range call at that point, lion targeting single group 30 miles, which signals to the rest of the aircraft in the package that you are on an intercept timeline. The next point in the intercept timeline is at 25 nautical miles, and what you want to do there, if you're flying with a wingman, this really applies. What you want to do there is establish who has the targeting responsibility within that group. Typically, when you're flying with a wingman, who's ever on the right targets right and lead, and whoever is on the left targets left and trail. So you want to sort that out at 25 nautical miles. So you'd make radio calls such as one's targeting right, two is targeting left. The next point in the intercept timeline is at 20 nautical miles, and that's when you want to take your forward quarter medium range missile shot, your AIM 120 shot. So what you want to do at 20 nautical miles is turn, place your target into the launch acceptability region, steering dot inside your steering circle, take your shot, and then crank. Continue that turn into a crank maneuver, which is putting your target at 50 degrees angle off. Now, what that does is a couple of things. It keeps the target locked so that your missile uh, can get targeting information until it goes pitbull. Um, it minimizes the weapon engagement zone that you give the threat, right? It slows the downrange travel, right? It denies a perfect shot to the bandit. It's got to be at least 50 degrees to be effective. And you want to be going fast. You want to be in afterburner at this point and going as fast as you can go, maintaining that 50 degrees angle off. You've got to have more of a cross range component than you have a downrange component. Um, and remember, you don't want to gimbal the contact and lose radar lock. So you may have to continue angling into the bandit a little bit just to keep it from losing lock. The next phase of the intercept is at 15 nautical miles. You're going to assess the status of your target. By this point, your AIM 120 should be going pit bull, and you're going to do a defensive maneuver if you have to, right? And you should perform that defensive maneuver no later than 8 nautical miles. So between 15 nautical miles and 8 nautical miles, the AIM 120 should go pit bull. And now if the bandit has you locked or has fired on you, then you'll continue that crank into a notch. If you've got a 50-degree angle off, you continue 40 more degrees, put the bandit and the missile at 90 degrees to notch it. And at that point, you should have defeated the missile. And at this stage, you'll make a call such as 1, defending south, right? Just so your wingman is aware of what you're doing. Following that, now it's time for the follow-on, right? If the AIM 120 did its job, awesome. But you're going to want to turn into the bandit. Based on what you've turned so far, it should be a 110 to 130 degree turn out of the defense. Make your call. One's in left, and if the, like I said, if the AIM 120 did its job, great. If not, you'll find yourself set up for either another AIM 120 shot or an AIM 9 shot. So at that point, either proceed to the merge, do what you got to do, right? And then once that's completed, you're in the post-employment phase. And that phase is really just the goal is to regain your situational awareness, right? Get yourself on a flow heading back to friendly airspace, whether it be back to a neighboring cap station, back to your original cap station, but just to establish that flow back towards friendly airspace and regain your situational awareness. And make a call at that point, such as Lion Flow 090 Angels 10 Smash 400, so that your wingman can also establish flow out of the area and find you.
So let's look now at a video example of an intercept timeline involving a AIM 120 deployment. Here in this video, we're on our cap station. We're at 25,000 feet flowing east, 4.4 units of AOA, 260 knots indicated, and we get a call from AWACS of a target flanking. So piques our interest. We'll go ahead and keep an eye on it. There's no reason at this point to leave our cap station. It's not within our commit criteria. But we've got it on radar, and we'll watch and see what it's doing. You can see it is getting closer. We'll watch it progress. It's about 70 miles now, 65, 70 miles. Progresses down to 60 miles. Track wall scan will be very useful when we do have that. We don't have that in early access phase right now, so we really don't have any choice except to lock a target at this point. So it's reached 60 miles. We go ahead and lock it. We take a look at the geometry. He's at 28,000 feet, Mach 1. There's no target aspect at all, 1,000 knots of closure, so he's really coming at us. So he's met our commit criteria. Radio call at this point, Lion targeting single, bullseye. So we're going to go ahead and continue looking at this guy, point and assess.
Overlord, Bra 102, 450 at 28,000 knots.
So he continues to come straight at us. We're 20 degrees off. One of the things we're looking for is to see if any target aspect is generating. It's not. He's continuing to head right at us. The other thing we're doing at this point is accelerating. We're at military power now and accelerating to more of a tactical airspeed, continuing to watch him come on down the radar attack display. Approaching 35 miles. It's time to make our choice here. So we're obviously fully committed to this one. He's coming straight at us.
Overlord, passing waypoint 2 at 30,000.
So he's locked us up. 30 miles now. We're on our intercept timeline. Radio call, Lion targeting single 30 miles. Right, so we're on our intercept timeline. Right 50 degrees angle off. What we're doing here is we're denying him a perfect weapon engagement scenario and seeing if we can generate any target aspect here, if he's going to keep coming right at us. Obviously he is. So 20 miles now, it's about time to pause it there. It's about time to take our missile shot. One thing to point out here is, he's going to get his shot, right? Eventually. But what we've done here is we've made the geometry work in our favor. And yeah, he's going to get a shot, but when he does, it's going to be on our terms. We've controlled the geometry of the intercept to work in our favor. We're not being reactive. He's going to get a missile shot, but it's going to be in a manner that we dictate and a manner that we can easily sort of handle here, as we'll see. So we'll press on. We've hit 20 nautical miles, so we turn into him. All right, he's launched on us at this point, which is okay. We're going to continue our turn. We're going to take our Fox 3 here, continue into a crank, get a good 40, 50 degrees angle off here. The missile will very quickly reach Pitbull, so we'll continue on into a notch, still maintaining the radar lock for a little while, but we defeated the missile. Now we can turn back into him. Looks like the missile might have required us there for a second. So back into him. Now we're assessing how the AIM-120 did. Looks like he's still there, but now we're set up for another AIM-120 shot, and he's defensive at this point, if nothing else. Looks like he did take another shot, not realizing that the AIM-120 did, in fact, do its job. He's smoking, but so that's successful intercept there. Successful AIM-120 employment. So now the goal at this point is regaining our situational awareness. Is anybody else around? Anybody else we need to be worried about? Let's establish a flow out of the area. We're heading back to our cap station at this point, regaining our situational awareness. We'll make a call, Lion flow 270, Angels 20, smash 400, something like that. So that's a successful engagement on a intercept timeline employing an AIM-120. So now let's look at another video of a intercept timeline. This one will involve a AIM-9 employment. The setup is very similar. On cap, 25,000 feet, 4.5 units of AOA, 265 knots indicated. We get a call from AWACS, target inbound hot. So we turn to point and assess. Looking at the radar attack display, he'll come up here in just a second. So he's at 70 nautical miles now. Hasn't met our commit criteria yet. So we'll sort of still continue on our cap station here. No need to be dragged away unnecessarily. Continues to move on down. It's approaching 60 nautical miles. So we lock him up at this point. Let's assess the geometry. He's at looks like 28,000 feet, Mach 1, high rate of closure, no target aspect. He's coming straight at us. So we'll turn 20 degrees off, continue to point and assess the geometry. He's generating, giving us no target aspect. So as we turn, he's turning with us. He's determined to press this engagement. So now we're at 50 nautical miles now. We're obviously going to commit to this contact. We make a call to AWACS informing of our intentions. Lion targeting single, bullseye at 200 for 80. And we'll continue to press. Things will start happening very quickly with this kind of closure rate. There's 40 nautical miles. He's Mach 1.4 now, Mach 1.5,
Overlord,
28,000
passing
feet.
waypoint 2 at 30,000.
Another thing you'll notice, we're max power now,
Overlord, on station
max rated
at
thrust,
2
military power,
for 90 at
right?
30,000.
Accelerating tactical speeds, 30 nautical miles. We make our radio call that we're on our timeline line targeting single 30 miles, right? So situational awareness for the rest of the group. Turn to 50 knots, rather 50 degrees, right angle off. Again, very similar to the AIM-120 shot. By turning 50 degrees angle off, we're denying him a perfect, missile shot at us, while at the same time building geometry that works in our favor. Just like before, he's going to get his shot. We're going to turn into him, and he's going to get a shot, but it's going to be on our terms and in a geometry that we choose that works for us. So pressing on, there's 20 nautical miles. I don't have any AIM-120, so no sense in turning in at this point, right? This is purely an AIM-9 engagement for me. So angling to the right, we don't want to gimbal him and lose contact, so we'll continue to angle into him until we get to 10 nautical miles now. So we'll select AIM-9 and turn head on. And we talked, I mentioned earlier in the lesson about target aspect, right? Target aspect is totally within the bandit's control. He denied us any kind of lateral separation by continuing to point at us even as we turned off of him. So he denied us lateral separation. So what we need to do now is create our own, right? So turn into him. We're going to take an AIM-9 shot, and he's going to have to react to that if he wants to survive. And so that's instant target aspect, right? Instant lateral separation, instant turning room. So that's the goal here of this head-on shot. It's a low probability shot. It probably will not work, but the goal here is to get him turning, generate lateral separation, and give us turning room.
Enfield 1-1, Overlord, merged.
So there's the tone. There's our shot. Now he's got to move, right? So, and now we're doing our displacement turn. Remember, we talked about displacement turn. We arrived at 10 nautical miles with essentially zero lateral separation, right? So we got to create our own. So we took a missile shot, low probability missile shot, but what it got him turning. It's given us target aspect now. It's given us some turning room, and now we perform that displacement turn, right? Remember the rule of 40. 40 degrees displacement minus whatever target aspect you did have. Well, we had 0, right? So performing a 40-degree angle off displacement turn to the left here, right? That gives us our turning room. So now we have the room to turn back in on him, re-engage, and take that second AIM-9 shot. And he's really defensive at this point. We've owned the geometry here. And there's our shot. Good hit. Looks like it didn't kill him, but he's a lame duck at this point. It looks like, yeah, he's smoking. And he's just trying to take it out of there. So we own him at this point. And now we have an easy follow-up gunshot. So there you have it. That concludes our lesson on intercept geometry and progression. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.